The gala was meant to be a night of elegance, celebrating charitable efforts for underprivileged children. Melania Trump stood gracefully at the podium, addressing the importance of giving back when a sudden voice cut through the calm. "You're nothing but a gold digger," Olivia, a vocal activist, shouted from the crowd. "You married for wealth, not love. How dare you lecture people about giving back when you've taken so much?" The room fell silent, eyes shifting between Olivia and Melania, expecting conflict. But what Melania said next would leave the entire audience speechless. The gala hall was frozen, the air thick with tension after Olivia's harsh accusation echoed across the room. All eyes remained fixed on Melania Trump, who stood poised at the podium, her expression calm but serious. The elegant atmosphere of the charity event had shattered, replaced with a palpable discomfort as guests exchanged whispered reactions. Olivia, emboldened by the silence, took another step forward. Her voice grew louder, trembling with emotion. "You stand here, draped in designer clothes, preaching about giving back. But let's be honest, you didn't earn this spotlight. You married into it. How many women working 2 jobs right now would kill for the privilege you have? What have you really sacrificed for all this attention?" Melania didn't flinch. She remained composed, her hands gently resting on the podium. Her silence, far from weakness, seemed to deepen the tension in the room. The crowd was clearly divided. Some nodded in quiet agreement with Olivia's accusations, while others shook their heads, whispering words of disapproval toward her public outburst. A man near the front, clearly uncomfortable, leaned over to his wife. "This isn't the place for this," he murmured. But Olivia wasn't finished. "Stop pretending you're some saint. You're part of the problem, marrying for wealth and standing on stages like this while people suffer. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking." The words stung, but Melania's face remained unchanged, her eyes locked onto Olivia. Slowly she exhaled, the microphone amplifying the sound of her measured breath. She finally spoke, her voice calm yet piercing. "You have assumed much about me, without truly knowing me. I will not raise my voice, but I will speak my truth. Not for your approval, but for clarity." The crowd's murmurs faded, as curiosity replaced judgment. Olivia crossed her arms, still defiant, but her fiery glare had started to waver under Melania's unshaken presence. The room remained still, as if the entire gala had collectively held its breath after Melania's composed response. Olivia's defiance seemed momentarily shaken, but her arms remained crossed, as though she was bracing herself for a counterattack. The crowd, however, was no longer purely judgmental. Some guests whispered to one another, their initial agreement with Olivia now tinged with curiosity. Others appeared visibly uncomfortable, glancing between the 2 women as tension hung thick in the air. A journalist seated near the back discreetly raised his phone, recording the exchange. Melania, still poised, looked over the audience with grace and clarity. Her voice remained steady as she continued, her Slovene accent gently shaping her words. "I understand that you may have strong feelings," she said, her gaze never leaving Olivia. "You are entitled to your opinions. But it is dangerous to reduce a person's entire life to a single headline, to judge someone's character without knowing their heart." Her words seemed to settle over the crowd like a calming wave. Some heads nodded subtly, while others remained rigid, waiting for Olivia's next move. But Olivia wasn't ready to back down just yet. She stepped closer, her voice louder. "You say I don't know you, but your life has been on every magazine cover for years. You expect us to believe you worked hard for this wealth when you married into it? Look around. We're here raising money for families who can barely afford food, and you're wearing thousands of dollars in jewelry." A murmur rippled through the crowd again. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others seemed torn, caught between Olivia's emotional outburst and Melania's calm restraint. Melania, however, didn't react with anger. She tilted her head slightly, her expression still composed. "You are right about one thing," she responded, voice unwavering. "I am privileged. I will never deny that. But privilege does not define a person's character. I was not born into wealth. I come from a small town in Slovenia, raised by hardworking parents who taught me dignity and respect. Before I ever met my husband, I worked tirelessly, often far from home, alone, with no safety net. What you see today is not the beginning of my story, and it does not give you the full picture of who I am. The crowd fell completely silent. Even Olivia's face had softened, though her arms remained crossed, clearly struggling to maintain her previous defiance. The balance of the confrontation had begun to shift. The room seemed to pulse with quiet tension as Melania's words hung in the air. Olivia blinked, clearly caught off guard by the calm, direct response. The crowd, once teetering on quiet support for the activist's accusations, now seemed more divided. Some whispering quietly, others nodding in agreement with Melania's measured grace. Melania took a step closer to the microphone, her gaze steady but not unkind. She spoke with the same poise, her voice softer but even more powerful in its control. "I do not expect sympathy," she began, her accent giving each word a measured elegance. "But I will not let you define my life by assumptions. Yes, I married a powerful man, but that choice did not erase my identity. Before I met my husband, I worked for everything I had. I left my country as a young woman with nothing but dreams and hard work. I built my career as a model, not through wealth but through discipline and sacrifice." A few guests near the front exchanged glances, clearly absorbing the weight of her words. Olivia, however, shook her head, attempting to regain her footing. "Come on," Olivia said, her voice less confident than before. "You still had connections. You didn't struggle like the people we're trying to help tonight. Your success came because of your marriage. Admit it." Melania didn't flinch. Instead, she clasped her hands gently together, keeping her focus directly on Olivia. "I have never denied my husband's influence on my life. But let me be clear. My success did not begin with him, nor will it end with him. I am not here tonight because of who I married. I am here because I choose to use my platform to help those without a voice. If you wish to judge me by my actions, not by the assumptions you've made." The power in her voice shifted the energy of the entire room. What began as an accusation was turning into something deeper, an invitation for understanding. Olivia's defiant expression faltered for the first time. She opened her mouth to respond but hesitated, as if searching for the right words. A man in the back murmured, She has a point." Another guest whispered, "She's handling this with class." But Melania wasn't finished. "I do not need to prove myself tonight, Olivia," she continued, her voice still calm but unwavering. "I came here for the same reason you did, to support a cause greater than ourselves. I understand your pain, but we cannot lift others by tearing each other down." The crowd shifted, heads nodded more openly now. Olivia, though visibly struggling to maintain her argument, remained silent as Melania's words settled over the entire gala. The weight of Melania's words hung heavy in the air, her poise radiating an unshakable calm. Yet Olivia wasn't ready to back down. Though her voice trembled slightly, she took another step forward, determined to reclaim control of the moment. "You talk about using your platform for good," Olivia began, her voice sharper now. "But what good have you really done? All I see is someone who stands quietly beside her husband while he makes decisions that hurt millions. When was the last time you spoke out on your own? When did you really make a difference? Or are you just here tonight for publicity?" A hush rippled through the crowd, the tension reigniting. Some guests frowned, while others nodded subtly, waiting to see how Melania would respond. Melania remained silent for a moment, absorbing the accusation with the same steady composure she had shown all evening. Then she spoke, her voice quieter but no less powerful. "You misunderstand me, Olivia. My presence here tonight is not for show. I stand here because I believe that true service often happens quietly. I do not need to make loud declarations for my actions to matter. The elegance of her words made Olivia hesitate. But the activist shook her head, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. Actions like what? Smiling for cameras? Attending events with million-dollar donors? Olivia's voice was louder now, the frustration behind her words undeniable. People in the real world are struggling. And you want us to believe showing up here in a designer dress helps them? Prove it. The crowd stirred again, the tension growing thicker as Melania's eyes remained locked with Olivia's. But instead of defensiveness, Melania responded with quiet grace. I do not need to prove my heart to you, she said softly. But since you have asked, I will share. The room fell silent again, the elegance in her voice commanding respect. I was not born into luxury. I grew up in a modest home in Slovenia. My father worked long hours to provide for us, and my mother sewed clothes to help make ends meet. I remember those days, before the lights, before the cameras. I worked for everything I have now, not just through modeling, but through discipline and faith. Her gaze swept the crowd now, including everyone in her message. I support causes not for the headlines, but because I know how it feels to wonder if your future will ever be brighter. I know the value of hope. I fund programs quietly, without press. I speak to young women about self-respect not because I seek validation, but because I want them to believe in themselves. A few heads nodded. The energy was shifting yet again. Olivia, Melania added, her tone softer now. I respect your passion. But passion without understanding can become harmful. We do not need to tear each other down to create change. Olivia opened her mouth to speak but said nothing. The crowd was watching, waiting for what would happen next. The silence lingered as Melania's words settled over the crowd. Olivia, visibly struggling with the weight of her own emotions, remained speechless. The tension that had once filled the gala had shifted, no longer fueled by confrontation but by the vulnerability in Melania's voice. Melania took a breath, her voice steady but softer now. You've questioned my intentions, Olivia. You've accused me of standing in privilege without pain, but what you do not know is the cost of living under constant scrutiny, assumptions, and judgment. The audience remained frozen, captivated, as Melania continued. I left my home country as a young woman with little more than my dreams. I did not grow up with luxury. My parents worked hard for everything we had. My father in a factory, my mother designing clothes at home. I worked hard too. Modeling was not glamorous at first, it was lonely. I spent years far from home, saving every penny. Success was not handed to me. It was earned. A few heads nodded now. Even Olivia's defensive posture was beginning to soften. But even after building a career on my own, I learned that the world sees what it wants to see. I have been called many things: too quiet, too reserved, too privileged, and yes, a gold digger. People assume my marriage erased my identity. They reduced me to the title of someone's wife, as if my accomplishments before meant nothing. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. I did not speak out often, not because I had nothing to say, but because I learned that dignity sometimes means staying silent when the world tries to tear you down. The emotional depth of her words rippled through the audience. Olivia's crossed arms had dropped to her sides, her lips parted slightly in disbelief. Melania continued, her eyes never leaving Olivia's. But do you know what hurts the most? When my son was born, the same critics who judged me targeted him. A child, because of his last name. I chose to stay silent for him, to protect him, even when it meant letting the world believe false things about me, not out of weakness, out of love. A murmur spread through the audience. A woman near the back whispered, I didn't know that. Melania's voice dropped to a near whisper but remained firm. You speak of justice, Olivia. So do I. But justice cannot come from assumptions. Real change is born when we stop tearing others down and start lifting others up. I stand here tonight because I choose compassion over conflict. Olivia blinked, clearly shaken. For the first time, she looked less like someone defending a stance and more like someone confronting their own pain. The crowd was no longer divided. They were silent, absorbing the weight of her words. The room remained quiet, but the atmosphere had shifted entirely. The weight of Melania's words lingered, echoing with vulnerability and strength. Olivia stood motionless, her face pale, her arms at her sides. The fire in her eyes had dimmed, not extinguished but replaced by something more fragile. For a long moment she didn't speak. She looked at Melania, then at the crowd, then back down at her hands as if struggling to find the words. Finally she exhaled, voice trembling. You're right, Olivia admitted, her voice quieter now but still raw. I was judging you, but not because of who you are, because of what I've been through. The crowd stirred slightly. A ripple of curiosity swept through the room as Olivia continued, her voice breaking. My mother, she struggled her whole life. She raised me alone, working 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. I remember watching her cry at night when she thought I was asleep. She was exhausted, broken. And then my father came back after leaving us for years. Suddenly he had money, remarried a younger woman, and my mom was forgotten, like her pain never mattered. Her voice cracked fully now and tears welled in her eyes. When I saw you tonight, Olivia whispered, I didn't see you. I saw her. I saw every woman who was left behind while someone else got the spotlight. I projected all that pain onto you because I didn't know where else to put it. The crowd was still. No more whispers. No judgment. Just quiet. Heavy. Empathy. Melania nodded, her expression soft but not pitying, understanding. I am sorry for your pain, Olivia, she responded gently. Truly, and I understand more than you know. My parents also worked tirelessly so I could have a better life. Pain like that, it leaves scars. But holding on to it, letting it harden your heart, hurts you more than anyone else. Olivia looked down, wiping her face with the back of her hand clearly shaken. I guess I just felt, powerless, she confessed. Speaking out was the only way I knew how to feel heard. Melania took a step forward, her voice calm but powerful. Your voice does matter, Olivia, but how we use it matters even more. We can choose to build each other up, or we can let pain turn us against one another. The crowd watched, many visibly moved. Some wiped their eyes, while others exchanged glances of silent understanding. For the first time, Olivia looked truly vulnerable. And for the first time, the confrontation felt less like an argument, and more like the beginning of healing. The crowd remained silent, caught in the emotional vulnerability unfolding before them. Olivia stood quietly now, her once defiant posture softened, her face streaked with silent tears. For the first time, her pain had been exposed, not as anger, but as grief she had carried for too long. Melania, standing with grace, took a small step closer. Her voice was gentle but unwavering. Olivia, she began, you have shown great courage today. To speak your pain aloud, to be vulnerable. This is strength, not weakness. Olivia blinked, clearly unprepared for the kindness in Melania's tone. She shook her head slightly, voice trembling. I don't deserve kindness after how I spoke to you, she whispered. I was cruel. I made assumptions. I'm not proud of it. Melania held her gaze, nodding softly. We all make mistakes, she replied. Pain can cloud our hearts, but it does not have to define us. I understand why you felt hurt, and I do not blame you for expressing it. What matters now is what we choose to do with that pain. The room was filled with quiet emotion. Guests who had once whispered behind their hands now watched with reverence. A woman near the back discreetly wiped away tears, while an older man folded his arms, nodding in silent approval. Melania continued, speaking not just to Olivia but to everyone. I have been judged my entire life, called names, mocked, criticized, but I have learned that true strength is not measured in the words of others. It is measured in how we respond when those words try to break us. The crowd seemed to exhale, absorbing the wisdom in her words. Olivia's hands trembled slightly as she listened. Melania's voice softened even further. You have every right to feel hurt, but please do not let that pain turn into bitterness. You are stronger than your anger. And I see a woman tonight who cares deeply for justice, for fairness. That passion can be a light, not a weapon. A tear finally escaped Olivia's eye. She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know you carried so much pain, too. Melania gave a small, graceful smile. We all do, Olivia. That is why kindness matters so much. The confrontation had dissolved entirely. What remained now was a moment of profound compassion. Two women, once divided, now standing together in mutual understanding. The silence in the gala hall now felt different, no longer tense but fragile, like the space had been transformed from confrontation into something deeply personal. Olivia stood there, no longer guarded, no longer defiant. Her arms hung loosely at her sides, her face marked with quiet regret. She swallowed hard, struggling to steady her trembling voice as she looked at Melania. I owe you an apology, Olivia said, her words uneven but genuine. I let my pain speak louder than my heart tonight. I judged you without knowing you. I assumed the worst because it was easier than facing my own grief. Her voice broke slightly, and she paused to compose herself, blinking back tears. Melania nodded gently, her expression one of quiet understanding. The crowd, still captivated, listened with rapt attention. Olivia exhaled shakily, continuing. I realize now that I wasn't speaking to you. I was speaking to every memory I've carried, every time I felt invisible or powerless watching my mother suffer. And I took that out on you, without knowing your story or the struggles you faced. The raw honesty in her voice made the crowd shift. People whispered softly among themselves, some clearly moved. Melania remained composed but warm, her eyes reflecting empathy. Thank you for your words, Olivia, she responded softly. It takes strength to admit when we have let pain speak for us. I respect you for standing here and being honest about your feelings. Olivia shook her head gently, her voice still fragile. No, you deserve the respect. The way you responded tonight. I see now that it was grace, not weakness. I'm sorry for what I said. I was wrong. The crowd seemed to exhale, the tension fully dissolved. Someone near the back whispered, This is powerful. Melania offered a small, sincere smile. I accept your apology, Olivia. We all carry pain, and sometimes that pain can blind us to truth. What matters is that we learn and grow from it. A single clap echoed from the far side of the room, then another. Slowly the applause built. Not loud, not celebratory, but heartfelt and respectful. Olivia, still visibly emotional, nodded through her tears. Thank you for your kindness, Melania responded softly. Kindness is what makes us stronger. And tonight you've shown courage. That matters more than any mistake. The respectful applause lingered, echoing softly throughout the gala hall. The crowd, once divided, now seemed unified in quiet reflection. Olivia, still visibly emotional, had taken a step back from the spotlight, her face marked not by shame, but growth. Melania remained at the podium, her calm gaze sweeping over the audience. She could feel the weight of what had just unfolded, a confrontation transformed into healing. Now, it was time to close the moment with grace. She took a steady breath before speaking, her voice clear yet gentle. What happened tonight was not planned, and perhaps it needed to happen. She began, her words deliberate. Because it reminds us of something often forgotten. Behind every opinion, every assumption, there is a human being with a story. and those stories deserve to be heard before they are judged. A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience, soft but thoughtful. Melania continued, her tone becoming more heartfelt. I have lived most of my adult life in the public eye. I have been called many things, some kind, many cruel. I have been reduced to labels. Model, wife, and worse. But none of us are just one title. None of us are the simple version the world creates for us. She let those words settle for a moment, the vulnerability cutting through the tension completely. I didn't stand here tonight expecting to defend my character, but I hope what has happened here reminds all of us that real strength is not found in loud words or harsh judgments. Real strength is found in patience, grace, and the courage to forgive. The crowd remained utterly silent, hanging on every word. Olivia, standing at the edge of the stage, wiped her eyes discreetly, clearly absorbing the message. Melania continued, voice steady but emotional. Each of us carries pain, some visible, some hidden. Tonight, Olivia has shown the courage to share her pain openly, and that deserves as much respect as any other act of strength. A quiet clap broke out again, softer, more intimate than before. Melania glanced back toward Olivia and with a slight smile finished with, "Let us leave here tonight, not divided by assumptions, but reminded of the power we have when we choose to listen, when we choose kindness." The applause swelled, filling the room not with spectacle but sincere admiration. The applause filled the gala hall, not with the loudness of celebration but the quiet strength of understanding. It was a sound of respect, not spectacle. Melania Trump stepped back from the podium, her elegant composure unchanged, yet there was a softness in her expression, a quiet victory not of words, but of healing. Olivia, standing to the side, remained visibly emotional. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, the weight of the moment still pressing on her heart. Yet this time, she wasn't consumed by shame. She had found something deeper, clarity, growth. The energy in the room felt transformed. Guests who had once whispered with skepticism now exchanged looks of quiet respect. Conversations were hushed, more thoughtful. The confrontation had turned into a profound lesson in compassion. As the applause began to fade, a woman in the audience, an older guest with silver hair and a pearl necklace, stood up. Her voice, though soft, carried weight. "I came here tonight expecting speeches, not truth. What we just witnessed was rare. Two women who chose understanding over anger. That is what we all need more of." Another guest, a young man near the back, nodded. "It's easy to judge when we only see headlines. But this was powerful. Thank you, both of you." The applause returned, warmer, more genuine. Later that evening, clips from the event began circulating online. At first, only a few shares, but soon the footage spread like wildfire. It wasn't just a viral moment, it was a message. Watch Melania Trump stuns crowd with emotional response to confrontation, a lesson in grace. The video was shared across platforms not for controversy but for its depth. The comments reflected the impact. This is how real conversation should happen. She handled herself with class. We can all learn from this. Olivia was brave to admit her pain. Melania's response, pure grace. Even Olivia, days later, issued a public statement. "I was wrong to judge. Melania showed me how powerful kindness can be. I'm grateful for the lesson and the forgiveness she extended when I didn't deserve it." Weeks after the event, Melania and Olivia collaborated again, this time not in confrontation but in partnership. Together, they announced a new scholarship fund supporting single mothers working toward financial independence, blending both of their messages, strength in struggle and healing through empathy. The ripple effect of that single night continued long after, a reminder that grace, when given the chance, could change everything.